Today we're going to grout this tile floor. I installed the floor tiles yesterday, so the first thing we need to do in order to apply the grout is to remove these spacers and clean the tiles of any dirt or residual mortar. We also need to make sure all of the cracks are free of mortar because we want a nice channel for the grout to go into. So I'll start by taking out these spacers. I'm just using a nail. Be careful not to scratch the tile as you're doing this. I've removed all of the tile spacers and vacuumed the entire floor. Now I'm going to clean the floor with a wet cloth. I need to make sure to remove any mortar from both the tops of the tiles and in the cracks. The floor is now clean enough for grout, so I will mix up a batch. I've mixed up my grout and it's ready to apply. I'm using a sanded grout. Sanded grout is recommended whenever the grout line is over 1/8 of an inch, and my grout line being 1/4 of an inch qualifies. I'm using a rubber trowel to spread the grout and this little putty knife to mix it and put it down onto the floor. So I'll get started. I'll start by taking a nice big scoop of this and putting it down onto the floor, and then using the rubber trowel push it into the cracks. And I will just continue in this manner until I've done the entire floor. I'll wipe the excess from the flats of the tiles and reapply it in the cracks. After I initially push the grout into the crack, I like to wipe it down diagonally. That way it doesn't pull any of the grout back out of the crack. I've finished applying the grout to the floor, but as you might guess, we're not finished with this project yet. What I'm going to do now is let the grout start to dry to the point of it being hazy and dry in the middle of the tile, and then I'm going to use a slightly damp sponge and start wiping off the excess grout from the tiles. I'm using the same bucket for my rinse water that I used for the grout. If you choose to do the same, save a little bit of the grout just in case you need to fill in a spot. That way you don't have to mix any more later. The grout is now starting to dry, so I will give it its first little bath. Start with a sponge that is almost dry. So just get it a little bit damp and just lightly wipe the tile and the grout line. What we're doing here is taking off the excess grout from the tops of the tiles, but we're also smoothing the grout in the grout lines. Don't push very hard at all, or you will remove too much material from the grout line and then you'll have to reapply. Don't worry about getting it clean at this point. We're just starting the process of removing the excess grout. You can also use the sponge to shape the corners and the grout lines up against the trim and on the edges of the tiles. I'm done with the first wipe down of the floor. I will clean out my water bucket and wait about 20 minutes for some of the water to evaporate, and then I will go over it again with a sponge in the same manner. With this second batch of water, I'm not concentrating so much on the grout lines. I'm just cleaning the excess grout off of the flat surfaces of the tiles. I'm now on the third rinse, and this time I'm not just going over the flats of the tiles, I'm actually wiping over the grout lines themselves. Be sure to do this lightly because you don't want to take out too much of the grout. If you do happen to get a little bit too vigorous with your wiping and a low spot occurs, just take a little bit of your excess grout and you can just push it in there. And wipe it back down with the sponge. I'm now finished with the third rinsing of the floor. I've washed the tile surfaces themselves and I've gone over the grout lines. I've taken good care to shape the edge and corner areas to my liking. I'm going to let this dry for about an hour now so that all of the excess water can evaporate, and then I will rinse it again. I've allowed the floor to dry for about an hour, and I have a clean bucket of water, and I'm going to give the tiles another rinse. 4 rinses down and probably 1 or 2 more to go. I'm now almost done with the 5th rinse, and this one will be the last. After I'm done here, I will let it dry overnight, and there will still be a light haze on the tiles that I can either rinse off with my sponge, or I could buff it off with a clean dry towel. Here's the finished product. Thanks for watching.